hospital buzzed with the usual chaos of a busy maternity ward, but amid the cries and footsteps, an error was quietly made. One that would unravel lives years later. In the haze of exhaustion and routine, 3 babies entered the world almost back-to-back, including a pair of twins delivered via emergency C-section after a long, complicated labor whose identities would soon be confused. The tags meant to distinguish them got mixed up, and with it, their fates. 2 families left the hospital that day believing they had received their children, but the truth was hidden beneath layers of human error and silence. From the moment they could walk, Leona and Liana were inseparable, like moon and tide. Always close, but never quite the same. Born minutes apart in the early hours of a rainy August morning, the 2 were believed to be non-identical twins, raised in a warm but modest home by their doting mother, Evelyn. The house was always buzzing 3 other siblings, 2 dogs, and the ever-present scent of her mother's ginger tea. Leona was the quieter one, with thoughtful eyes and a sharp sense of observation, while Liana was more outspoken, always drawing attention with her laughter and fiery spirit. They shared everything: a room, clothes, secrets, and even the occasional teenage rebellion. But even in their bond, there were questions, moments when Leona would stare into the mirror and wonder why her reflection seemed like a mismatched puzzle next to her sister's. Their baby photos looked oddly distant, their temperaments diverged more with age, and relatives often joked that Liana took after Evelyn while Leona looked like someone else. Still, no one thought much of it. In their world, the idea that something so foundational could be wrong, something as sacred as birth, was unthinkable. But as they turned 19, the thread that bound their lives would begin to unravel, and a truth buried for nearly 2 decades would rise, silent and merciless, like a wave that had always been heading for shore. The camp was supposed to be just another box to tick: 3 days of forced group hugs, motivational chants, and awkward icebreakers. But it became the first ripple in what would become a storm. Leona had joined the regional student leadership retreat in the hills outside the city, trying to get out of her comfort zone. She didn't expect much beyond team activities and inspirational talks, but things shifted on the second day during lunch when 2 girls from another school kept staring at her. At first, she thought it was her frizzy hair or her oddly mismatched socks, but one of them eventually approached her with a hesitant smile. "Hey, this might sound weird, but you look exactly like our friend, Noreen," the girl said, flipping open her phone and showing a picture. The screen lit up with a candid image of a girl smiling on a beach, her eyes half closed from the sun, and Leona felt the ground slip beneath her. The resemblance wasn't casual. It wasn't just similar, it was uncanny, like staring at a slightly altered photo of herself. Her heart thudded uncomfortably as she forced a laugh and brushed it off, but something lodged itself deep in her chest. That night in her bunk, long after the others had fallen asleep, Leona scrolled through the stranger's Instagram account in stunned silence. Noreen. Same hairline, same sharp nose, same laugh tucked into dimples on either side. The photos looked like missing frames from her own life. She didn't tell anyone, not yet, but she knew something was off. She just didn't know how deep it ran. Back home, Leona couldn't keep it to herself. She waited until they were alone. Late at night, in their shared room lit only by the dim glow of a table lamp, and showed Liana the pictures. Her sister squinted at the screen, then leaned closer, her playful smirk fading into something uncertain. "Okay, that's freaky," she said. "She could be your clone." Leona nodded, her chest tight. "She has my laugh, my eyes, even the same birthmark under her chin." Liana didn't say much more, and neither of them slept well that night. The next day, Leona told their mother, Evelyn, gently, cautiously, as though testing the waters of a deep ocean. But Evelyn only laughed, waving off the suggestion like dust. "People always say things like that," she said. "You girls are just unique. Not everything needs a reason." But Leona saw something flash in her mother's eyes, just for a moment. A flicker of unease that was quickly buried under a firm smile. That tiny moment burned itself into Leona's mind, and in the days that followed, the silence between her and Liana grew. They both began to notice things they'd brushed off for years. How their baby pictures didn't line up. How their birth certificates had odd time gaps. How they shared no real physical features beyond skin tone. Leona started comparing dates, details, memories that no longer sat right. There was a quiet panic taking root. Not loud enough to scream, but strong enough to spread. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. And now they couldn't stop themselves from digging. The day Leona and Noreen met in person was the moment fantasy collided with reality and shattered it. It happened by pure coincidence at a university outreach event in the city mall where dozens of schools had gathered for career fairs and campus showcases. Leona had come with her class, and Noreen had come with hers. They were never meant to meet, but fate had grown tired of waiting. Their eyes locked across a crowd near a university booth, and time seemed to warp. They didn't speak at first, didn't have to. They just stared, unmoving, hearts pounding in eerie synchrony, their friends frozen around them. Noreen's lips parted in disbelief, and so did Leona's. They walked toward each other slowly, almost unwillingly, like mirrors drawn together by gravity. Standing face to face, they were like a duplicated photograph. Same jawline, same dimples, same tiny scar on the left eyebrow. The silence was deafening. Their friends gawked, whispered, pulled out phones. "She looks exactly like you," someone whispered behind Noreen. They finally spoke, hesitant at first, like strangers testing a familiar language. As they talked, more puzzle pieces clicked into place. Same birth date, similar early childhood quirks, and the feeling of being out of place growing up. When they parted that day, they weren't the same girls who arrived. Leona returned home with her thoughts spiraling like a hurricane. She and Noreen started messaging secretly, sharing stories, comparing timelines, bonding over similarities too precise to be dismissed as coincidence. It was no longer a mystery, they were connected by blood. Deep down, Leona already knew the truth. What she didn't know was just how far the lie had gone, or how many lives had been built on its shaky foundation. By August, the whisper of suspicion had grown into a need for proof, and both Leona and Noreen agreed. It was time to put everything on the table. They decided to take a DNA test. It was a decision that would either end the madness or confirm the impossible. But they didn't want to do it alone. Leona first approached her sister Liana, who had grown quieter with every new revelation. There was pain in Liana's eyes, something hard to define. Maybe fear, maybe denial. What if it's true? Leona whispered one night. What if we're not really twins? Liana didn't respond for a long time. When she finally did, her voice trembled. Then who am I? The question haunted them both. They finally told Evelyn everything about the girl at camp, about the photos, about the meeting at the carnival. And this time, Evelyn didn't laugh. She listened. Her hands shook as they talked. Her face paled when she heard the name of the hospital. After a long silence, she sighed a long, broken sigh and said quietly, "The night you were born, it was chaos. There was a power outage. They mixed up the tags on the babies. Just for a moment," they said. "But they assured me everything was corrected." But now Evelyn looked ill, her lips trembling, her eyes glossed with regret. Still, she agreed to take part in the test, as did Liana, along with Noreen and the man she thought was her father. The test was done at a university hospital a few towns away, discreetly, with everyone trying to keep their hopes in check. Took 3 weeks to get the results. 3 weeks of tense silences, unspoken fears, and sleepless nights. And when the call came, no one was ready for what they were about to learn. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a ticking bomb. No one wanted to open it first. Evelyn's hands trembled as she passed it to Leona, whose heartbeat felt like a drum in her throat. She opened it slowly, peeling away the flap as though it might bite. The moment her eyes found the results, she stopped breathing. "Noreen is my twin," she whispered. Her voice was a ghost in the room. "Not Liana." Evelyn collapsed into a chair, her face drained of all color, and covered her mouth as silent sobs escaped. Leona handed the paper to Liana, whose eyes scanned it in disbelief. Her lips parted, but no words came. The test was clear. 99.99% match between Leona and Noreen. A match that biology doesn't lie about. Liana was not a twin. She was the biological child of Noreen's supposed parents. A different family entirely. The world cracked under their feet. Evelyn wept openly, not just from guilt, but from the staggering realization that she had raised another woman's child, while her own flesh and blood had grown up in another home. Liana didn't cry. She just stood there, as still as a statue, staring at the wall as if trying to locate the coordinates of her identity. "Then who am I?" she asked again, but this time her voice was smaller. That question hung in the air like smoke, filling the room, stinging eyes, suffocating breath. Everything that had once been certain was now tangled in doubt. Who they loved, who they trusted, who they were. The lives of 3 young women had been rewritten with a single document, and now none of them knew how to turn the page. The days that followed were a blur of silence, distance, and unspoken grief. Liana withdrew into herself, barely speaking, avoiding eye contact, haunted by a storm of emotions she couldn't name. Leona tried to reach her, tried to remind her that nothing had changed in her heart, but every word felt hollow. How could Liana believe she belonged anywhere now, when the truth had snatched away the only identity she'd ever known? Evelyn, once the glue of their fragile home, was a shell of herself. The guilt consumed her. Every smile, every birthday, every lullaby she sang to the wrong child replayed in her mind like sins she couldn't confess. Across town, Noreen's world was no calmer. Though welcomed with cautious warmth into her biological family, the years they had lost were an open wound. She found herself mourning a life she never lived, a mother she never knew, and a sister, Leona, who had grown up beside someone else. When the 3 girls met again weeks later, it was awkward, tender, and unbearably real. They didn't know what to say. Apologies felt meaningless. Gratitude felt strange. They just sat together, the 3 of them, in the park where they used to play as children, though never all at once, staring out at the lake as the sky turned orange. Liana finally broke the silence. "I don't know where I belong anymore." Her voice cracked like glass. Leona reached for her hand. "With us," she whispered. "You always have, no matter what the test says." But the truth lingered like a 4th presence on the bench, unchangeable, irreversible. 3 lives braided by mistake, now untangled by truth. And none of them would ever be the same again. When the family finally met with the lawyer, the air was heavy with tension and unfinished grieving. Papers were spread across the desk like puzzle pieces, and the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm voice, listened patiently as Evelyn explained everything. The hospital's name, the power outage the night of the birth, the leg tag mix-up, the DNA results. The word negligence hung in the room like smoke. Legal action wasn't just a choice, it felt like a moral necessity. The lawyer explained their options: sue for emotional damages, demand a full internal investigation, possibly even bring a criminal case against the hospital for malpractice. But Evelyn's voice trembled when she asked, would that change anything? The truth was no. It wouldn't undo 19 years of misplaced love, confusion, or loss. It wouldn't return the time Noreen spent as a stranger or erase Liana's identity crisis. Still, a line had to be drawn, because what happened to them could never happen to another family again. When news of the lawsuit broke, it swept through the town like wildfire. People whispered in grocery lines and stared at Evelyn in markets. Some pitied her. Others blamed her. The hospital responded with tight lips and vague statements, offering sympathy but denying fault. The nurses on duty that night were either retired or unreachable. Records were incomplete. The case dragged on slowly, and the media caught wind of the human tragedy. Twins switched at birth, a family's nightmare, as headlines screamed. Noreen's foster father had passed just 2 months before the truth came out, which made her grief even heavier. Liana, meanwhile, refused to speak to reporters. They all want a story, she told Leona. But we're not a story, we're a wound. Still, the legal process became their shared fight, a strange new thread that kept them bound, not as sisters defined by blood, but as victims bound by betrayal. The courtroom became the one place they could speak without being interrupted by disbelief. And for the first time, they felt seen, not as confused girls or mistaken identities, but as people whose lives had been altered by something far bigger than any of them. Autumn crept in gently, cooling the air but not the pain that still simmered beneath the surface. Healing, they discovered, was not linear, it came in fragments. Some days felt almost normal, as if life had patched itself up quietly overnight. Then came the moments that ripped the wound wide open again. A birthday, a forgotten memory, a glance in the mirror that looked too much like someone else. Liana started therapy reluctantly at first. "I feel like a borrowed book," she told the therapist. "Like I was placed on the wrong shelf for years, and now that someone's found the error, they don't know where to return me." The therapist didn't fix her, but she listened, and slowly, Liana began to let herself feel grief, anger, betrayal, and something she feared most of all, love. Because despite it all, she still loved Evelyn, and she still loved Leona. That love made everything harder. Leona, for her part, doubled down on her attempts to bridge the broken pieces. She took Liana on weekend walks, cooked her favorite meals, and wrote her notes. "You are my sister, no matter what. I don't need proof to know that." But the gap between knowing and believing was wide. Meanwhile, Noreen was adjusting to her new life, quietly. Her new family adored her, but their love felt too eager sometimes, too urgent, like they were trying to make up for 2 lost decades in a single embrace. She missed her foster parents deeply, especially her late father, missed the quiet love they shared, even if it hadn't been bound by blood. One day, the 3 girls sat together again, not out of obligation but out of something that felt like choice. "I don't think we're here to replace what we lost," Noreen said, her voice soft. "But maybe we can build something new, something honest." They were not the same girls who had once smiled under matching birthday balloons. They were bruised, yes, changed undoubtedly, but they were also brave. And maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to see that the bonds we choose could sometimes be even stronger than the ones we're born with. Spring arrived with quiet forgiveness. The sakura trees in the city park bloomed softly, like an apology from the universe itself. By then, the legal case had concluded. The court ruled in favor of the family, declaring the hospital liable for medical negligence, ordering compensation, and demanding systemic reforms in maternity record-keeping and neonatal tagging. It was a legal victory, but it didn't feel triumphant. Money couldn't erase lost time. Justice couldn't rewrite memories. Still, it offered closure. A line drawn beneath the chaos. A way forward. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, watching Liana and Leona laughing over spilled juice at the table, and she allowed herself to smile again. Tentatively, like someone remembering how. She would never stop carrying guilt, but guilt had transformed into humility. She had almost lost both daughters, and now, she was choosing to keep them with open hands, not a closed heart. Liana was slowly reclaiming her identity, not just as a daughter, not just as a twin, but as herself. She no longer crumbled at the mention of real family. She had made peace with the fact that she had 2, one of blood and one of belonging. Noreen came over often. At first, it was awkward until the 3 girls realized something beautiful. They didn't have to pretend to be traditional sisters. They had something rarer, a shared story, a shared wound, a truth that no one else could understand. The final act of healing came quietly one evening as the 3 of them visited the grave of Noreen's foster father. They stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by spring blossoms and silence. "Thank you," Noreen whispered to the wind, "for loving me when I didn't know where I came from." Leona reached out, holding her tightly. Liana followed, wrapping them both in an embrace that said more than words ever could. They didn't have answers to everything. Some wounds would always remain, but they had found each other. And in doing so, they found something else, truth, yes, but also grace. A grace that let them live beyond the pain, beyond the switch, beyond the what-ifs. As they walked away together, side by side, the past trailed behind them not as a weight, but as a whisper. You are not defined by what was lost, but by what you choose to keep. Always check, always ask questions. Medical negligence is not just a procedural failure. It deeply affects human lives, identities, and trust, demanding continuous efforts to improve safety and uphold patients' rights. Subscribe to the White Coat Crimes for more shocking true stories, medical crimes, medical mysteries, and the dark side of healthcare you were never meant to see.